Awesome. Welcome, everyone. This is a hallway hangout talking about adoption pathways for full site editing. This is meant to be more problem finding than problem solving, so very much open dialogue. This is not here to prescribe any approaches. It's more to hear about how people are approaching things. So anything we find, I will make sure to follow up on. And ideally, since I do developer relations work, we can help create some resources around any blockers you all are finding. I'd also love to hear about any successes or fun things you all are discovering. But yeah, let's be friendly, kind to each other, all that good stuff. You can jump in and out as you'd like, and I will post the recording on the Make Test blog. Before we start, I do want to give a reminder for the block theme switching expiration. I'd love to see more responses there too. So if you have time, there's links in the outreach program, but I would love to have folks chime in there. I'll drop a link in the chat as well. So yeah, with that in mind, I'm going to open it up. So I would love to hear kind of how people are approaching things, what features folks are adopting, and just really how it's going. If there's any big blockers, now is a great time to share. If you want to humble brag, it's also a great space for that. So yeah, if anyone would like to jump in and share.
There was silence that I'm going to start, but mine's more like I've been playing, I guess. I've been really trying to experiment. I'm going to start on the theme JSON. I guess I'll start on the lighter side of the theme JSON. I guess it's the fun toy, and then we can start talking about other things. I've been trying to explore what that means in the context and like how, I'm going to use the word pure, but how can I just use that for themes rather than using any custom CSS. And you mentioned, an interesting thing is you mentioned the issues or snags or things. Really, I think the thing in my mind at the moment is the debugging of theme JSON and how easily it is to oopsie, and then to like the trauma. And the other day I had to compare TT1 blocks with my theme JSON to work out where I went wrong.
Yeah,
and that feels
I've done
like
that. I've been there.
and it feels like I shouldn't have to do that, right? And it was a simple thing, of course, because it always is, but it's just things like that. Like I'm preparing, so I'm writing a humble brag, I guess. I'm trying to write about this stuff as I'm writing about it, as I'm doing it, and I literally finding myself wanting to write a post on, oops, something's gone wrong in your theme JSON, here's what you should do. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I, I feel like, yes, this post is needed, but yes, not having to write this is also needed, because I love that tool. And it feels like it's like the same problems as functions.php used to have. So the sun has just decided to be the last of autumn sunshine. Yeah, so that, apart from that, it's just super fun to find out how much I can do with theme JSON rather than having to really do, like, I don't have to do like the editor CSS file, and I'm doing less and less variables. I'm doing more and more like WordPress variables. Like my SAS is like, my SAS is going down, my WordPress variables are going up. There's like this ometer. That was a lot for me, but yeah, just enjoying that. And things being fixed. So gradients was my big thing 6 weeks ago. The gradients were broken on the background. Now they're fixed. So like, that's the thing, like as we're playing and exploring, and I'm going to use word playing because I think that's important to do.
I like that word playing.
Yeah. As we're doing that and finding those edges, and I'm really lucky, I'm in super play mode with some stuff I'm doing. That is leading to bug tickets, and I think that that's really important, to just experiment and just create some art. I'm really enjoying like how far can I push it, and I'm enjoying things again. So yeah,
that's a lot really, for me. No, I love this, and I really like your like, hey, like a post on here's what to do if something goes wrong with theme JSON. I also find it really interesting that rather than turning to documentation for theme JSON, you're looking at TT1 blocks. And like, maybe that's something we have to add to the documentation. And I know
The
one of
reason I
things-
didn't turn to
Mhm.
documentation is I couldn't find any.
Yeah, that's what I'm like, aha.
I'll be honest,
a gap.
I did do a bit of a
Yeah.
Google and I found that there wasn't
Mhm.
any, and I was just like, wah, wah. Like I was just like, I rested on my like thema
Mhm.
knowledge, and my thema knowledge was compare it to something that worked before.
Mhm.
And so I was like, it's Gutenberg broken. Oh, try it with TT1. So I tried it with TT1. TT1 worked. It was, you know, when you load the editor and you get that attempted recovery
Yes.
in the full
Mhm.
site, you know, that generic message of like, whoopsie, something's wrong, which is basically like your theme JSON is broken in Gutenberg
Also,
speak.
the error messaging is probably something to explore too.
Yes, so some error messaging would be great, because at the
Yeah, I
moment
wanna add that.
it's reminding me of that block recovery. It's like the full site editing version of the block recovery, which
It's not always great. I'm taking notes, by the way, if you hear me typing or see me switching between things. So
Yeah, I
I
found
don't
when
think.
oh,
Sorry,
good.
I don't think, I will just caution to not over tool in this, because I don't want to like think that tools are the only solution. I think better error handling is a good solution, because I think eventually a lot of people will be using the visual interface to build with. So I don't want to like lean us too heavy into like obsessing with tool making. But I think in this teenage years, we need to make it a little bit easier so that people can experiment without having to compare to TT1. It didn't feel good.
Yeah, I
So-
found that using, I don't know what editor you might be using or not, but using like a syntax checker on the editor that you're using, so either Visual Studio Code using a JSON plugin, or even Sublime, others have plugins for JSON, and it kind of will alert you to any syntax errors, so that at least, like, I always make a mistake with the extra comma in JSON.
Yep,
it's such a
absolutely.
common thing, and like I wish it was more forgiving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the editor will give you some highlights on that part of it. At least you can, just for the syntax part of it alone, and that's usually the mistakes I end up making. I do wish there was a way, and I don't know if this would be something we'd want, like when I've made mistakes in the file, and then refresh the page, nothing happened, change something, nothing, like I go back and forth before I realize, oh, I made a mistake. So somehow, usually it's on the front end too. So I don't know if we actually want to surface your theme JSON is broken on the front end. So, but
Yeah.
maybe something in the
Definitely
admin.
within the admin, yeah, on the editor,
Yeah.
at least sort of something. I started a block theme very recently, and I was using the theme experiments PHP thing to generate it. So I generated it all out, and I was like, right, here I go, straight in. First thing, made a syntax error in the JSON. Didn't realize it was happening because I didn't have the linting set up like you said. I spent ages doing like, what have I done wrong? Like I've gone completely, can't do this off the bat. So yeah, some kind of like error, like we couldn't read your theme JSON at the very basic would be enough. And then later on we could add in like, you've missed this comma or whatever, if we get to that level of granularity.
Yeah. So with me, I had the VS Code. It wasn't actually a JSON error, which was even more of a clanger for me. What I'd done was I had like duplicated the settings, and it did not like that. It got very grumpy with me about having a duplicated settings. So I had like, I got very excited about typography, I think, or something like that. I decided I needed double. And it is something that happens, I think, because it's now part of that creativity flow. So it's kind of like similar to like how you would do CSS, I guess. So it's that kind of frenzy of creativity, or at least mine's a frenzy. And my file had that. And the ever instance I had was something that was, I think it was the syntax had changed or something like that from in a version. And it wasn't that the JSON was wrong, it was that it was now being declared differently. So it just, it had noped on me because of that. I do get a highlighter for the commas, and that's amazing and great, but it's when the editor says nope to me and my JSON file is fine. That's like my chasm of, I think, problems.
I had that same thing when I first did my redid the theme. I'd played with it before, and I'd forgotten the version number at the very top. So it says version 1.
Yeah.
And it made huge difference. Like it was like because it was behaving, but in a very unpredictable way, because I was using different settings from the previous version. And like, it's only because I played with it like when it was still experimental, but
Yeah.
it was definitely confusing and like, what is going on here?
I know tied to this, another thing that I heard last week was around, and a couple people have messaged me with some questions, is like how to disable things. So it's like, oh, all this stuff is being added, but how do we also opt out? And how do we like actually have control and lock things down? So that's a big thing. Is I think there is this excitement of like this new thing is being launched, but then we also need to have documentation, have clarity around like how to opt out. Like Carolina has this great, let me see if I can find it. I'll drop a link and when I can, we'll see. But she has this great like deep dive into like how different things require, like sometimes you need an empty array and you need to say like set to false. And other times you just can set it to false, or sometimes you just can have the empty array, and like there's some inconsistencies there. And it's also not necessarily easy to find the documentation for it.
Relating to that, just so that I know what I've set it to, and this isn't necessarily good because it just leads to a super long theme JSON, I'm declaring it, even if it's a default, just to know what that setting is set to. And that has the problem of these like super long files, which is okay with VS Code because I can collapse and I can manage my file a little bit better. But it does lead to gigantic files when I'm getting in. And something I've been really loving is like the block customization, loving doing that at the moment, and going like that kind of macro control. And you can go really huge files very easily if you're like getting that granular control and you're trying to get granular block control. I don't think splitting files out is the answer, but it's just being aware you have one style file is kind of what you're dealing with and what that means from a management perspective.
I really like the idea of splitting files out, not as a solution, but just as a I like allow people to do either way they want. So then you can have, okay, here's my typography, and then I can share that amongst themes, or here's how I want all the headers to be, or whatever it might be. And then you can share that amongst, if you're developing multiple themes, or oh, I really like the typography from that theme. Can I just grab those settings and apply them to my theme? I think that's where there's future power, but I don't think it should be used as a complexity management tool. Maybe that's
I had the idea of an index.
Yeah.
I think this would be great feedback, Marcus, to share on the block theme switching post. Just saying, just throw it out there.
I think splitting out the files like that is what I see happening more agency industry wise. It's a new concept that hopefully we can help with training. I'm Courtney on the training team, help with a lot of the stuff on Learn. And so not having the 20,000 line long style.css file, it's going to be a mindset shift for those that are not in a large scale agency culture. But often that crowd is coming from using third-party theme building other systems. So sort of teaching them how to split their files out and why there could be a performance benefit out of that, or organizationally finding your stuff would be really helpful.
Courtney, I'm curious, since you're here, and I'm so stoked you're here. It's good to, I don't know if you've been on a call before, but I feel like I know you. So it's like fun to actually,
I think we have.
Yeah, I feel like at some point we must have. But yeah, I'd love to hear, I don't know if you've heard anything from the training side of related to adoption pathways or any insights you have. I know you've done a bunch of stuff with training students previously. So I don't know if anything comes to mind that you see as something to be aware of.
Right now we're in the early stages, and you would probably know this part. We're beginning to make courses on Learn, not just workshops, but actual courses, and coming up with a term for a series of courses. Daisy will be doing one specifically around block themes. I am trying to keep an ear in. I think that there is such a huge market that is not going to instantly switch. So they built themes in legacy versions, and WordPress were back compatible. And so I'm trying to think through the training of older methods that we've had and a way to then bridge. We did this way with underscores. Now let's do it this way with block-based themes, and how we can, if Daisy runs fast with block-based theme course dev, how to say, for those that are dealing with client sites that are not ready to be updated yet, for those that haven't got the training for their own staff yet of how to do the new way, that bridge or that connection of saying, here's how we did it. Now here, relate it to this other thing. And so that may also help bump up the people that are not agency sort of folks for adopting how to split their themes down. And
I'm curious, I mean, Dave, I know, not to put you on the spot, I'm not putting anyone on the spot, but with the navigation editor work, like, and with the widgets work, like we've talked a lot about how those are good transition points. And I'm wondering what sort of, like, Courtney, this is me spitballing, but the idea of having like a course maybe dedicated to here's how to adopt and here's why you should adopt like the block-based widgets editor, like something even just simple, like a lesson on it of like, here's how to migrate over, or even explaining like, hey, you're worried about switching over and what will actually carry over. Here's the technical details of what will work and what you need to do to make it work, might be really valuable, because I know there's like a big emphasis on block themes, but I agree there needs to be more like detailed pathways, you know?
small chunk on ramps. Yeah, for sure. And so I will revisit. I was teaching in a boot camp. Some of you I've met, Marcus, I'm sorry. I think I met you about a year ago when I was teaching at a boot camp. And in the boot camp, the adoption rate wasn't there to get, I told my instructor facilitator folks, this is how much PHP my people need to get like tier 2 tech support. They weren't getting it. So this is why if I can work all on Learn and just give myself at Learn and say, here's the standards to get to. So I will revisit that roadmap that I created of what I teach in what order. And inside of that, make sure that we look at some simple on-ramp spots for blocks in widgets, how to be a user of a theme that is block-based. That needs to be in there in the user spot. Right now, we're also growing the training team. We have 2 of 3 automatic sponsored instructional designers aboard. More and more people are starting to take notice, which is very exciting. But breaking it down like a teacher would to help that adoption rate and that uptick.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really interesting. It's definitely something I'd be interested in helping with if that ever comes to fruition. I know there's been the people who worked on editing the widgets editor were keen to do that as well. So yeah, we can get back to you on that. Feel free to reach out. Yeah, I think that those 2 areas, like navigation and widgets. I mean, navigation is obviously experimental, but widgets is obviously out there in the wild. And thinking about like full site editing with a site editor, there's 2 things that we sort of care about. Is we're going to be editing with a block-based UI, and then we're going to be rendering with blocks. And it's like those are 2 new concepts when we're talking about your site, not just about your post. So if we can find ways to get people sort of comfortable and familiar with that as a concept without having to jump in feet first with the site editor, which is not really ready for prime time yet, then I think that's a good thing. And definitely widgets gives you that nice sort of gentle on-ramp into, if you've got widgets on your site, it shouldn't be that difficult to switch over to block-based widgets. And then not only do you get the original power that you had, but you also get the full power of the suite of blocks. And there's been a good amount of effort in making sure that we've got legacy support for legacy widgets, but we've also, they've added a widget group block now, so we can even support legacy markup patterns for those that need to do it. So if you've got an old site that's like a site on a classic theme and you think there's no way we're going to be able to jump straight to full site editing, we need like an on-ramp, then, you know, initially widgets and later on navigation seem like good avenues to explore for people. So if we can make that clearer and, you know, really illustrate that for people with a course or with some sort of documentation or whatever we come up with, that would seem to be a good plan to me.
Yeah, it's also, as you're talking, it's so interesting because it's like, yeah, I think as you said, like nav and widgets are like the initial entry point. And then I was thinking like, where does the template editor fit into this? The template parts, the isolated template parts thing, like maybe that's how you can explain it. Because one of the things I saw, the Gutenberg Times did this really great interview on like how to migrate a client site over. I'm going to try to find it. And yeah, here it is. Oh, thank God for your browser remembering things. But it was really cool. If you scroll down, there's like different levels. And I was like, man, I love how this is broken up. Like this is exactly what we need, is to say like, hey, here's like level 1. And here's how to slowly move people over. Here's level 2, here's level 3, here's level 4. And you could literally move someone through the whole system, or you could stay like, hey, we're just going to stay at level 3 for the next 2 years, like whatever it is. And kind of giving specific instructions along the way for each, I think would be really cool. And thinking about the template editor as maybe, because that introduces new concepts, that introduces multi-entity saving, that introduces more global control. There's also the management of all the templates and like how they actually work, and you've never been able to edit that ever before. So there's like these new concepts that you can branch a user into. And then maybe the last one is like more around global styles and actually like more the whatever the full site editing actual experience looks like. We actually don't know what the signature points will be. But I like thinking of this as different levels and like having that tied into courses and documentation and stuff. It's really exciting. Yeah.
Template editor. About the template editor that you sparked my mind. If you go through a lot of the biggest WordPress video-based courses that are out there, they walk you through creating a theme with underscores, starting with the template hierarchy. So you're learning the template hierarchy as you go. I'm searching for what that's going to look like.
Okay, I've gotten this question like 4 times. I have an answer. And
because I want to get that unlearned in the right way.
So
Like, how do we teach the template hierarchy?
So this is what's interesting. It's basically the template hierarchy is not changing, because what it is it's just HTML templates on top of those. So it's not actually changing. So like we couldn't even do a new one because it would be just HTML rather than PHP. So like,
yep.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I think that is a sticking point for people. Like that's literally you're at least the 4th person in the last like 2 weeks who has directly asked me that question. And it's like something we need to figure out how to communicate. Like I might just go and edit the documentation really
It's because it's the same word. It's because it's templates, so people think, oh, it must be the template highway. Because initially when it was the discussion, it was the confusion over it. In the origination, it was like, is it the template hierarchy? Because we're using the same word. I get it. We only have a limited amount of words. But in all of this, I don't think templates is the easiest concept. Block patterns is like the win concept. Like I love King JSON and I love all of that, but I honestly think that a lot of people are going to come to that a lot later. I think the full themes people are going to come to a lot later. She says, with sadness in her heart, because I adore these full, amazing, beautiful themes that we can do. But I think that's a bit later for some people. Block patterns is so powerful and something that people can get up and running with. It solves a lot of the problems that people have with these macro blocks. It solves a lot of client-based issues. So I think really focusing on, I see that in the list. I think it's a bit high in the list. I would like put it like up more.
It's more the concept of this approach, because this is an older post from what I remember. But yeah, I love the idea of having like, hey, if you're looking to get started and you don't know where to go, this is like the easiest. Like start here, you know, and like I think that's part of the confusion that's happening right now is people don't know until they're digging in, like, oh, whoa, this is actually way over my head and not what I want to do. Where's like something I can start with?
Even from a development and design perspective, they're way easier to get your noggin around and head around than they are if you start like on all the other stuff is just a lot more. Whereas patterns it introduces you to some of the foundational concepts of a lot of the other things. So it starts getting you shifting to thinking of these blocks, and then you can start thinking about using the block template words. If you put block in front of it, it's a bit easier as well. So block templates, block patterns, starts differentiating it a little bit for people.
So as I was teaching WordPress, normally we would go through all the user stuff and learning the most common theme page builder and plugins that are out there, because people will get clients and work with that. Before we would go full into creating a theme using underscores, we would go through, let's dig under the hood at Hello Dolly. I would like to find a plugin that is that teaching tool, that is block teaching tool. And then I could see in there, then also going into the patterns area, perhaps patterns before we fork a plugin. And then after we get through the patterns and we start looking at, great, now I want to make my own theme. When we're building our own themes, what I am hunting for is that that connection. It's not the naming of templates versus template hierarchy, but before a person can even apply at a plugin company for a job to know what's going on, they need to know the template hierarchy inside and out really well. And that's because the plugin hooks into all these places. So we learn a theme before we get into really advanced plugin with multiple blocks and admin settings and things. We learn how to create the whole thing ourselves. So what I'm trying to wrap my head around is how to teach the template hierarchy with all the template parts and not having a tool like underscores, because we so often relied on, let's crack open underscores to build the thing. As we assemble it together, we're learning what the WordPress template hierarchy is and what that means. And so what I'm searching for is that we're going in a different direction than underscores. Frankly, we have for quite a few years. But that way of teaching, here is the template hierarchy as you're building your theme. I'm hunting for like, I need to see a dev.
Have you
walk me through it, and then I can turn it into a course.
Yeah. Have you played with TT1 blocks?
Yeah.
Just because for me, I go back to that because it feels like my rock that I compare to at the moment. There is also a theme experiments repo that I would strongly point to because that is it's a bit woolly in the sense of it's got a lot of different stuff in there, but it's where there are so many good links being given into the chat as well, which is not good for video, but there's
I'll
a lot of
them, don't worry.
Yes, there's a lot of, I come back to TT1 blocks because of the simplicity, and it's something that we can rely on simplicity. But honestly, I think we need to shift a little bit from thinking that the theme is one of the bedrocks. That would be my shift for you. The theme is just going back to styling, which I think is exactly what it should have been. This is my personal opinion, thoughts of my own. And the plugin it will be doing functionality. So getting people to have that understanding of blocks, have that understanding of block JSON, such a powerful, amazing thing. I love block JSON as well. Having the understanding of how the editor, where you can hook in, that is, to me, really important from a developer perspective, as opposed to understanding some of the escalated theme development we used to have to understand. But that's one perspective, and there's lots of other voices here.
Yeah, I think the exciting thing for like learning is a lot of the concepts end up being the same. Once you kind of grasp the block grammar, what a block is, and it sounds like a fancy word for just HTML, but like it's what defines a block. So once like you can train that, I think learning through patterns is a good way, or learning through just building a block itself. And then once you can kind of understand the block pattern and understand that block grammar, then you can see how that builds up, and you're not learning new concepts. So a block template is, okay, a block template is just a set of blocks in these block grammars. And then a theme is just putting together these block templates. And then you end up using a lot of the same knowledge as you grow, which is a lot different than the PHP method of, okay, how do I put a widget in? Like, what's a widget? A widget's this weird function over here that we have to define the spot where it goes. You end up doing all this weird different PHP, because that's just how it grew organically. But now that we can kind of rebuild it and reconstruct it, a block, okay, what's a widget? A widget's just a block, or it's a set of block grammars. And then like you end up getting this nice consistent model across it all, and you don't have to learn, okay, how's a menu different than a widget, or how, like you end up having all these older concepts that are a lot harder. And then with the new kind of block based theme that we're going towards, we're not there yet. So this is still kind of the future of what full site editing will be. You end up with a lot more consistency throughout. And then theme JSON to style, all that stuff is the kind of connecting piece. So I'm excited for like making it a lot simpler. So as we grow there, Courtney, I think from what you're asking is maybe more of a more complete theme or a starter theme. I think block-based is trying to be that has the different template hierarchies and maybe a bunch of different pages from 404 to single pages to archive pages. I haven't dived too much into block-based yet, but maybe that's something we can include in that, so we have a lot more examples so people can learn that hierarchy.
Yeah, this is like, my notes are outrageous. I already have like almost 3 pages. This is fantastic. I did want to see, like, just because it's really easy to get not stuck with the theme JSON and all that sort of stuff, but like, has anyone played around with a template editor or felt like it was worth adopting at this point? Because I know some folks like looked at it and were excited about it, but then when it came with 5.8, it was like, this doesn't feel ready yet. Where it was kind of passed by, which is fine. I think it totally, just to get more testing done is great. I check the stats from time to time, like I think once a month, to see how many themes have adopted it, and there's not too many, but that's another thing that I'm actually really keen to see, as well as theme blocks. I also think theme blocks aren't getting enough of a like shout out as I would like to see, because even adopting like using the query loop block would be huge. And eventually the navigation block gets merged in 5.9. I think that'll be another really big FSE feature to explore.
One of our
So,
contributors has a meetup that he was asking for advice on how to teach the template editor.
Ooh.
And I took him to the new way. I shared with him that article that I had shared with you that walks you through how to enable that feature, because his meetup group is not the most technically savvy. So for them, doing it without code was
With the plugin?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I had them put the Gutenberg plugin in and then add the hook to
Oh, nice. There is also like
enable
someone
that.
made a plugin. Like
Oh,
yeah, hold on, let me find it. I only know this because I did a
awesome.
very brief YouTube video, and I think I mentioned the plugin, which is kind of cool.
So one of the meetups at least is starting to, they're doing a whole series and they'll
That's
use that method.
Awesome.
So I'm using it on all my own sites, which is like a small percentage of my own, but just I'm trying to use it. And honestly, there's hitches, but I find I love the exporting and creating and exporting and then taking template files. I'm not really into hand creating templates in the editor. I'm into visually creating them and exporting them. I don't know the mindset to do that. I think I would always visually create them, but that may just be me. Maybe that's just I don't know enough block going from that, like code level. I just can see that I would always visually do that.
I'm the opposite. I like I like doing I hand edit the HTML, which is crazy. I know, like I'm hand editing like JSON attributes and all this stuff.
It's not, but I guess that shows having this option for different people is good. I think the way that I've done it has caused me issues in the past because I've had to like nuke everything and revert back. Having a copy of my files at all time in like an archive state has saved me so many times on like an oopsie upgrade or something like so I kind of want revisions of that.
That's the exact reason I do it by hand, is because I can do files and I know like, okay, if I save it, it'll be on the disk, or I can commit it and Git, or I can do whatever I want. And then any change I make on the editor, I'm not as confident what I'll do there will be what I want in the end. And so it's hard to get these checkpoints.
I also sync it to Git. So I'm kind of doing both, but I'm not editing it, if that makes sense. So I'm bringing it into my theme file and then I'm saving it to Git. I'm belt and braces, I guess, like double approach. And then so that I think I've had one too many upgrades where I've lost things. But I've been doing it from right at the beginning because I want to play with this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just refreshing to see it grow. I think that's the exciting thing, to be able to I think I would, if I was doing it on someone's site and they weren't as ready to be as experimental today, I would lock a lot more down. But I would still, I think the power of theme JSON from a branding perspective is something I definitely think is worth considering really soon, because it just
say that one more time. Sorry, I just want to make sure I captured
the power of the theme JSON, like being able to have like the branding colors and being able to have people stick to that a lot easier.
I thought you were talking about the branding of theme JSON, and I was like, wait, whoa.
No,
okay, got
with the way
yeah, I was like, hold on. I don't think I heard that right.
With the way, with the interface, with surfacing colors and being able to lock down like the color picker so that you're tied to those colors, and then with block style, all those kind of like things that we always dreamed of.
WP Campus a lot. I have a presentation for full sighting soon with them that I recorded, and that was one of the things that it's interesting. It's almost like we both need how to adopt, and then it's like how to safely adopt, like how to adopt and lock it down. Like it's like,
because honestly, people see a color picker and freak out, rightly, because Color Picker is like a sweetie shop.
Which I know,
It's
Marcus,
like-
your post, I think, went into that a little bit, right?
Yeah, I think it's a there's two users, right? There's a theme developer, the person creating the theme, and then there's a person who's going to download, install, and then use the theme. And so trying to, and we'll get there as we develop features, but it's walking the balance of, okay, what are we adding for the theme developer, which I think is a focus now. So things are a little more open because you want like the theme developer to do whatever they want to be able to do. But then when you publish your theme, how do you lock it down so the user doesn't, change things in a way that makes it not aesthetic or whatever, like whatever you're trying to achieve, right?
And I think that's a combination of block styles, having maybe pattern variation, whatever we kind of go into, right? Like looking into having a lot more styled variations, I guess. Duotone has shown us some options and possible ways and some different variations. And I think more things like that enable us to say, okay, your defaults aren't like this. You're like 3 colors. Your defaults are this design system, and now you can use, and that's kind of what this is. It's a design system with an interface. That's sort of what we've created. So yeah, that was a lot of me again, but I've been playing with it, so it's fun.
Yeah, to answer your question, Anne, about templates, I have not used the block-based templates on my personal theme. There's a couple of still gaps on, and I've already filed the issues, and I've actually been working on the bugs to fix them. Just from like
making a mess and cleaning it up. I love that.
Yeah. Well, I scratch my own itch.
Yeah.
But just like building some menus or building like some like the logic. You don't realize, like we end up rebuilding a lot of, like you can do like conditional logic, or you can say, okay, I want to list of pages just for these child elements or whatever it might be. You can do a lot with PHP, and kind of duplicating that in this case, a query loop or the page list loop or things like that ends up being a lot more complicated. So getting all those features there, I think will help the adoption also.
Yeah, I know. Also, I keep missing the navigation block, to be honest. Like, it's like, this is cool, and I like having the template, but I really want to add like some, it's like you can do something, but yeah, it's just not the same. You can maybe have buttons or whatever. But I've thought about my personal site's on WordPress.com. I want to migrate it out at some point and do, because I won't link to it, but basically I could. That would be very obnoxious of me. But it's set up where it's just like pictures and then titles of the post, and they kind of have a little bit of animation on it. Very, very simple. I kind of was going for something visual, kind of like an Instagram feed where you could have it. And I want it'd be very easy in theory to migrate this over, but I'm waiting for more options. And I want to like have, I think what would be really cool is have, based on the category of posts, have customized templates. So it's like all my posts about mental health could look like this, and it could be a whole curated experience versus like posts about WordPress could look like this. Because I write about really different things, but related topics. And I'd love to have, just a little bit of a different experience where if someone's like, hey, can you drop a link to your site for this event, they're not going to get post about like anxiety or like my travels. They're going to get like a link specifically curated with a different menu and all sorts of stuff for specifically WordPress related content. So kind of curating my site out, I think would be super neat eventually, but we're just not there.
Yeah, and that's the kind of that conditional logic I was talking about, having some context also inside the page, right? So if you're on this page with this tag, can I also apply that tag then to the query loop that's going to fetch the latest posts, whatever it might be, something along those lines, and just getting those use cases and then figuring out how to build out the features to do that.
Obscure question.
Sorry.
Oh, Tammy, go ahead.
Can I plus one just quickly, the directional templates? I am so excited. I've done a couple where just on postal page where I've just done one unique one for that bit of content, and I'm so excited for that. It reminds me, I feel old, but back in the day, like used to like hand HTML one, because you'd be like, look at how amazing I am that I did this on my blog, and it takes so long to do it for like your one blog post, but it was like a thing to do it, to do like your typography, and I can do it without it being a big thing for me, and it looks like a big swish thing, and that feels like a huge it's all that art direction in the hands of people that I think we're on the cusp of. We haven't quite got that, and we're not necessarily going to get there fully in this release. I think we're like on the ramp of art direction, if that makes sense. On Mount Art Direction, maybe. And that's really what over the next year, I think we're going to start seeing, where we just enable all these things that you had to have a plugin or you just could achieve with WordPress for people to be able to do. So yeah, it's super exciting.
My obscure thought when you were discussing having templates by category, Anne, it reminded me of the purpose of post formats. And that's our littlest used feature in inside of WordPress these days. But are any themes already styled for that? And could that be handled with using the template editor?
I actually don't know. Yeah, I'm gonna have to follow up on that. That's actually interesting. I don't know what.
It's
how
like
that's
not a high priority item, but it's a backwards compatible item.
Right. How are post formats integrated?
I don't know how much it's used still. I remember 2013 was a big
all the
theme
rage.
for
Yeah,
like a different style for each post format. So
I remember being so particular about
that
making
dates
sure to
us.
select, like,
And now we see where
like
Tumblr
live
is owned.
streams.
Just
yeah. It's so funny to think about. It's
But
exciting.
it's a lot of that. It's a lot of that stuff which was so hard to do, and we kind of gave up because it was a chore to do, right? Like changing your style, doing all these live streams and things. We now can do it because it's going to be easy. So yeah, it's a nostalgia thing, but I'm kind of happy that we'll be able to do some of these nostalgia things and do them well, and do them performant and do them better, because they weren't bad ideas, we just couldn't do them that well, and we were having to work around things.
I'm particularly excited for a lot of the global styles work. Like cannot wait to test it, first of all, but second of all, just the ease at which you could make over your site. Like to me, I'm like, I would love that, to be like, oh, you know what? Like if I could change the color of my car in 10 minutes, I would change the color of my car like every week. That's how I feel about my website. It's like an extension where I'm like, man, I would love, like I just changed the color of my blog because it was like just for fun, and just switched around some stuff, and it took me 10 minutes. I was like, this is great. But like I couldn't get as granular as I wanted without adding custom CSS or getting into like other stuff that I was like, this is annoying, and I just stopped. But it would be neat. I like have this idea at some point of like long from now, I have some like off the wall ideas of like, okay, set a timer and spend 15 minutes messing with global styles and see how far you can get in changing your site. Just like fun little challenges like that, where it's like, don't spend more than 5 minutes. Cause like I probably will spend from time to time, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, fiddling around with like an Instagram post. I'm off with the gram currently, but if I love photography and I love to kind of mess with photos, and, I'll put some time into it. And I think it'd be a fun challenge to do similar stuff just with your website, because we've never been able to do that really before. I mean, kind of a little bit, but you couldn't really get that far. But yeah,
you can mix in.
I was gonna say, you always had the fear of breaking. Okay, do I really want to dive into PHP? I'm gonna have to what's changing this one element or in CSS gonna cascade down to everything else, or like you always had that concern with tweaking things. So it's like, I think Theme JSON does have that kind of almost a safety net of like, okay, you can tweak a couple things in here. It's gonna be,
it reminds me of.
I
was going to say, it reminds me of like when we used to build sites, and we used to have like a massive like SAS or whatever configuration file with all your, like you will have all your theme colors in there, you have all your fonts in there, and you just say, right, I'm going to change this one. It's like that, but good. It's like that, but better. Like in theory, we should be able to,
like,
you should be able to have your site like as a theme, and then just be able to change. Like the goal is like just change a few values, and you should have like a completely different look of a site quite easily. If you're creative enough, like as a designer, whatever, you should be able to really change it. I mean, I took my site that I was trying to rebuild from something that just looked really horrible, and then added a few font definitions and a few bits of color, and suddenly it looks like my site. Like that was 2 seconds. So the dream is there. It's really close. It's really close, I feel.
And integrated patterns.
It's surprising how little CSS. So I tried initially to have no CSS. I needed a tiny little bit, but it is surprising how little. I was like, how little. And then on blocks, you start like adding shapes to blocks. You can do some pretty wacky, awesome kind of patterns where you're adding shapes, and you can do some fun stuff. I mean, I'm just playing, but you can do some really fun stuff. The thing I'm excited about is maybe the ability to, blue sky, kind of save presets and then switch, you know, those switching and all that kind of stuff. And you don't have to have a child theme. You can change within the theme and it remembers. Like, you've kind of got that with like your colors, but having like predefined styles. You kind of used to have this back in the day under the customizer, right? A theme would come with presets. Most themes came with like styles. It was weird, but most themes did come with styles. It was kind of a thing for a while. And you'd select like the color palette of the theme, and just having things like that start happening.
I think your audio just cut out. Hold on.
Yeah, the audio just cut out.
Just like
Something we can't hear you.
randomly cut you off. It's fine. It's fine.
The internet hates me.
Oh, there you go. Fun. Yeah, no, it's really fun to think about too, like different repositories of things that people try, whether it's patterns or styles or colors. Like I use a couple different tools on the internet right now that's like, this could be baked into WordPress where I can very easily create pretty designs. Especially, I don't know why, but I've started messing around with using the pattern directory just to see what's there. And there's some gorgeous, like, I'm like, wow, like one of my friends, she messaged me, I was like, Anne, did you do this? This is so beautiful. And I was like, not really. Like I didn't actually do this, but it was just like a pattern with a really pretty header and like a cool background. And she was just like so impressed. And I like had to break the news to her that I was like, I didn't do it, but you can do it with WordPress. And like, I think that was the cool part, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly the goal, right? It's enable, like have these tools, allow designers to publish easily with these tools, and then allow people to use those designs on their sites and stuff. Like that's what I'm excited for. Like the theme JSON is not, I'm an okay designer. I'm not even a good designer. I'm an engineer, but I can use design that other people have made. And so like, if you can do that with a theme JSON, like, okay, like I really like the typography on this site, just take that piece and put it into my site. Or patterns are a wonderful way to do that too. I think that's a huge, goal of everything we're doing.
It's setting good boundaries, right? It's a designer saying, this is the taste of this theme. This is the boundaries and the style guide, or whatever we're going to call it. Go for it within that, and you'll get to set. And some will just be like, go for it. Here's your rainbow color picker. Do whatever you want. And some will be like, here's your branding. Got to be a bit more kind of with it, depending on where you sit on it. And having that option, I think, is the excitement of this, but natively having that option. So when a theme is changed, predictability of these tools, and that's not been what the end users had before, is you've had to learn different tool sets or different interfaces. And
or if you apply something from another site, like, oh, none of my class names match, and nothing, like it ends up being a huge.
It's also the interfaces are different. Like you have to, all these different customizing interfaces learning on top of WordPress. So you not like, it's like this stack of interface learning, which is awesome. Not for someone having to learn and switching and moving, and people should be able to switch and move, and that should be their right to be able to change things.
You know what, Marcus, you were saying about like you're not much of a designer or whatever. I'm the same, but I think there's a lot of people out there who are in that same boat. And the thing that Patterns does is it kind of, in a way, it sort of democratizes design in a way, because you've got that, and with global styles, you kind of got that like massive palette of stuff that you could use, which is amazing. And if you're I came from an agency background when I used to work in agency land, and I know for a fact, if I was still in my old shoes now, the thing I would be thinking about most is like, this is really good for sort of controlling and giving my clients what they need, but just within certain boundaries. So like, don't worry about these blocks, don't worry about that. We've created for you a set of common patterns. And when you want to do something new, just come and talk to us. We'll do the work for you. We'll sort it out for you. And you can pay us to do it. And then all you have to do is click this pattern button and insert like testimonial, and it's done. I cannot tell you the demand for that when I was leaving agency land. It was out of this world. We were trying to like hand roll this stuff. And all the clients were saying, we want to be able to do this sort of insert patterns. And then designers were saying, we want to design a design system. We just didn't have that tooling. The tooling is coming. And I think that's the real promise of this coming up. And it's like going to be super valuable. We just have to be able to do it in a way where we can enable and disable features in a smart way. Because that's what people don't want. They want to have the confidence that when they say, I want to turn this thing off, there's not going to be some person who's come along new to the company, hasn't bothered reading the documentations, not familiar with it, and just comes in and picks random colors, and then you get the call, why is the website broken? So
pink is not our brand. Pink and orange is not our brand. Why is
pink
that?
is not our brand.
Pink and orange is not the brand colors. I think that's the thing, though. It just empowers good design, and I think that in the chat, everyone's a good designer, and that's the thing. Everyone can design with this, and it brings out that capability, and it stops people thinking, oh well, I can't do that. But you can, because it's there, and it's not allowing it's very easy to have a bad experience with WordPress currently when you talk about styling or you talk about customization, unfortunately. And I don't want to be on WordPress, but it is, because it's really complicated, and all of these things are making it very easy to have a good experience, which is great. I would rather that's a happy path to something that should be joyous, which is creating things. It should be a really pleasant experience and really empowering, and it's better for the business. What you point out, Dave, is if more agencies can empower people and more people can start being like, oh, WordPress can do this. It was such a pleasant experience for me from a client perspective. That's brilliant.
I feel like this is the perfect note to wrap up on. So now I'm like all fired up. I also know like all of you are doing so much work in your own realms to kind of make these adoption pathways happen. So I do want to give like a thank you and keep it going and keep the feedback coming. I really enjoyed this. I hope to do similar ones in the future, just because I think this is a topic that's obviously going to be reoccurring. And I have a lot of notes. I'm probably going to post the recap tomorrow at this point, because I need to like make sense of them and come out with some good kind of action items. I already am noodling on like, how could I do a levels post for like FSC pathways? I think that could be a good, like for now, just like side post before eventually getting it into more documentation and like courses and stuff. But this is awesome. Thank you all so much for hopping on and joining and spending time, especially in today's world. I know none of us have time, so I always really appreciate it when folks jump into this stuff. So
thank you for wrangling it.
Thank you for creating the space. Thank you.
Of course. We'll see you all on Slack, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day or evening or whatever.
Good, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
See you online.